Hi, I'm Georgie.
And I'm VG.
Welcome to our podcast, Diversity and Inclusion, Satisfying the Tick Box.
In today's episode, we'll be covering racial discrimination.
So, just a bit of background of what discrimination actually is. It's when someone's treated unfairly for any of multiple reasons, for example, age, disability, sexual orientation, and many more. So, what these are protected characteristics which come under the Equality Act, and discrimination can basically be based on any one of these characteristics.
And when we're talking about racial discrimination, what that is when you're treated unfairly because of your race or because of the race of someone you're connected with, such as your partner.
So it's great to be back speaking to you. How's your week been?
The week's been busy with work and everything, but the other thing is in the last couple of days we've had this heat wave where it's 33 degrees in London, and yeah, stuck indoors, not a great thing.
Yeah, it's mad. I feel like us Brits really can't deal with the heat, can we?
Definitely
Um,
not.
so you're based in Croydon, aren't you, in London?
Indeed, yep, South London.
Have you lived there all your life?
No, I'm actually from Paris. I moved to Croydon in 2003 when I was 10. So my parents moved us over here.
Oh wow, that's two very different places, isn't it? How was it growing up in Croydon then?
So obviously Croydon being my adoptive city in London, it's been an awesome journey so far. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think Croydon's so diverse. I know there's a lot of negative talks about Croydon, negative info that comes, and some parts are quite dangerous. But you know, Croydon for me, Croydon made me who I am right now. It's yeah, it's been fun. I went to a state school called Langfranc when I was growing up. And yeah, shout out to all the Langfranc Mandem if you're listening to this. Langfranc was how do I say, was a great stepping stone. It really gave me the foundation as an individual.
That sounds really cool. I've been to Croydon. It is a nice place, isn't it? So as a kid growing up in Croydon, can you think of the first time when you maybe experienced discrimination, or did you ever feel like you were targeted at all?
Yeah, I would say, you know, when you're growing up in Croydon or anywhere else, you've always got a group of mates that you hang around with. And I clearly remember this when we were 15, 16, and it was in the town centre. We were just there hanging around, and we got stopped and searched quite a few times by the police. And that is at that age you don't really understand, you know, when they explain to you the grounds or why they're doing this. They'd probably tell you, oh, it's a well-known area for drugs, it's a well-known area for gangs. But yeah, we got stop and search numerous times, and what makes it more official is when you get that 50, 90 stop and search slip. So it's a receipt to explaining why you've been stopped. And when you read that, it's like it just didn't make sense as a kid to you, you know, why you were stopped, why they were doing this. For them, it's probably like I said, a group of school children hanging around, loitering around the town centre. But for me, the way I saw that, it was just me and just a group of friends hanging around, like every other kid would do. And moving on from that, the other thing that has been constant and growing up and is still around for me is every time I go into a shop or a store, somehow some of the security guys just follow me around. It's kind of weird to explain, but it does happen to me. It's like I'll walk into the store, they'll look at me, and then all of a sudden I'm walking to an aisle and they're following me around. And to this day, that still happens at some of the shops. You know, I am probably that stereotype.
That must just be so odd. You just having someone follow you around. You just want to get on with your shopping on your own, don't you? And kind of enjoy yourself. But that must have been really tough also being that age, having that happen to you because you must have been so confused. And I think there's various different types of discrimination, isn't there? So there's direct and indirect, and then obviously harassment and victimization. So would you say that you've experienced any of these types of discrimination?
Yeah, 100%, Higgsy. I've experienced it. So the one event that really sticks to my mind and has been probably a catalyst in terms of my career path is in 2012 August. I was coming back from France to London on the Eurostar, and I was with my sister at that time. that's the same period that the London Olympics were running in London. And what happened is we got off the train and we're walking through, the border force control area. And somehow, out of all the passengers that were there, I was the only one who got stopped. So I was 19 at that time, Asian male with a beard. I got stopped by these two burly white officers in suits, and they started to ask for my passport. After I gave them my passport, they started to really ask me intrusive questions. So where did I go? Who did I stay with? What did I do on those specific days that I was in Paris? And it's at that time I didn't really understand. I looked around, I was like, okay, why is it just me that got stopped? And I looked at my sister. I've made eye contact with my sister. I was like, this is odd, you know. And I just felt like I was being interviewed in front of everyone on the spot. And I felt like I felt humiliated. I felt like it's why me out of everyone? Is it because I'm Asian? Is it because I got a beard? And do you know what? If I knew what I know now, I would have definitely asked for those officers' justification, their details, and taken this up further. I would have made an official complaint. But on the flip side of this, that incident was that interaction. That was a catalyst for me to really join the police because I wanted to be representing my people effectively because it was two white officers talking to me. It wasn't a true representation of the community that they were serving. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to join the police.
Yeah, I guess like you said earlier, growing up in Croydon your whole life, you don't really see yourself as other. Do you know what I mean? Like it must have been really tough to have that experience and kind of not understand why. So you said you were this is what made you go into the police. Can you just explain a bit more about your journey on getting into the police and what it was like?
So my first experience within a police force was when I was 21. It was a couple of months after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I went into this voluntary police officer role within a police force in the UK. That really opened my eyes for me. It was based in a very difficult borough at that time, where you had a lot of things going on. So it was a lot of fun. I loved it, but there were a lot of learnings for me as well. And whilst I was doing that voluntary role on a part-time basis, I actually managed to secure a full-time position in the control room for that police force as well, and where I was handling 999 and 111 calls, so emergency and non-emergency calls. Even then, that was a different kind of experience, a different kind of challenge because you're dealing with people on the phone, and that's how much, as far as you can help them. That was quite tough at times, some of the situations. So you could be taking a domestic violence call. It could be, oh, I'm getting assaulted. I need the police here right now. Or someone's breaking into my house, or I've been stabbed, I've been shot. You get the gist. It was quite a difficult role. I'm gonna be honest about that. You could be dealing with any type of call that came in. So that experience really opened my eyes in terms of dealing with people and talking to people to try get the information out of them. Moving on, my next experience within a police force was within a police neighborhood team in an affluent part of the UK. And then I eventually progressed into a police officer role full time. So that's really my background within the police.
That's so interesting. So when you went into being a full-time police officer, what was your day-to-day like? Because I bet your adrenaline was on 100 miles per hour all the time, having all these different calls and having to go to all these different places. What was it like for you?
Higgsy, it was literally that. It was the adrenaline so high because I was attached to an emergency response team. So anyone that calls 999 or 101, we're the first persons that go there and deal with that call and whatever incident it is. So you could be going to a live burglary or robbery or even an assault. It could be anything, or even a mental health crisis. So you don't know what the nature of the call is until that call comes in, and they pass it on to you as if you're an available unit to go deal with that. So the adrenaline was always high because that excitement of going there, trying to deal with it. And remember, it's always about being flexible and agile because you just never know whether that call, how it's going to pan out, but also whether it is a legitimate call or it's something else that you're going to deal with. So there was always a lot of excitement. But one of the fundamental core values was I always loved to help people that were in need, people that, might not have a voice, people that find it difficult to ask for help.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like no amount of training, whatever the situation is, will prepare you for the things that you'll have to kind of deal with.
To be honest, just to add something from that it's a different ball game in training and real life situation. It's two completely different things. It's what you get taught in a training environment. It's very much in a safe environment, and it's stimulated. But when you go out in the real world, you just never know how it pans out.
Yeah, I guess you'd probably kind of hope it would be in the or pan out in the same way that it would in a training environment, but I'm guessing it never does, right?
It's never like that, I'll tell you that. I remember learning how to do a stop and search at training school and going out in town and actually doing it. It's very different. People, you just never know how someone might react to you, and you always have to be on your guard. It's as simple as that. Maybe that's why I'm always on the edge. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's carried on from being in the police.
It's like in my DNA now, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah. So you obviously said earlier that you dealt with the public quite a lot. Did you ever experience any discrimination when dealing with the public?
Yeah, so quite a few times actually, Higgsy. The one standout incident was when I attended this criminal damage call where the suspect was unseen, and we got there. Just to cut the story short, eventually I had to arrest that person, and I took them back to custody. And whilst in custody, what that person said to me was, and this is in front of the custody sergeant, whilst I'm presenting that person there and booking them in, was that person looked at me in my eyes and said, there are many seeds of evil in the world. They are called. You are a terrorist, and he just pointed at me in front of the sergeant.
Oh my God.
Yep. So and I just want to clarify. As a police officer, you're trained to take a level of abuse and be resilient. But when they bring a sort of racial element into it, or even religious element, or anything that's going to cause discrimination, that's when you deal with it. So what I did is I further arrested this person for a racially aggravated public order. The sergeant opposite me was a white sergeant, and he was fuming. I remember that clearly. So yeah, that was one of the incidents that I had to deal with, and
That
it
must have
was,
been absolutely infuriating to hear someone say that. How did that make you feel in the moment?
I consider myself to be a person who has quite high levels of resilience, but at that moment, whilst this person standing next to me saying this, you, you do get angry because they're making assumptions about you.
So why do you think that some people say these disgusting things and also have these views? Do you think it's um more of a product of their environment, or do you think it's kind of an innate thing that comes from within?
Higgsy, if I'm being totally honest with you, I think it's a combination of a number of factors. So that could include being ignorant. It could also be the biases and prejudices that are ingrained in them from the people around them, for example, from the moment they were growing up and how they've been brought up. But it could also be various other factors like the media. But what I would like to point out is that I don't think that a racist person is born racist. I think that they are a product of their environment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's that whole thing, like when you put like two apples together, say if there's like an apple that's going a bit moldy and you put an apple next to that, that apple's going to go moldy and it's the exact same thing. So if you're around people that have these, I don't know, moldy views, like horrible views, then you're going to eventually think the same thing and you just get used to your environment, don't you think?
I totally agree again. I think it sometimes I wonder whether that's a systematic problem within the community.
Yeah. I think also it's hard because when people grow up with having these views just thrown at them, how do you that person essentially has to go and relearn everything that they've been taught growing up. And I think that takes a lot of time. But the people that are willing to relearn and do the work when they know that these views are very incorrect, I think that's when it's good. You've just got to make that change in yourself, I think.
And following on from your point, nothing is impossible. It is doable. If someone wants to change their mindset or their views on life, they can go through that journey. It's doable. It's just, are they willing to take that first step to make that positive change?
Exactly. And I think that also comes down to your environment. So if you think the people that you're around aren't serving you anymore and they're not bringing any positive change to your life, you've just got to remove yourself and kind of find a new group of people that actually have moral values and have the correct views in a way.
I think it could be a culture thing as well, or we've got many generations now in living together. So, and I'm going to give you an example because this has happened to me, and it was when I was attached to a local policing neighborhood team, and I attended to take a report from this person who lives in an affluent part of the town. And I was in uniform. You can clearly identify me as being part of that police team. So when I got there and this person opened the door, they didn't believe that I was part of the police, even though I was in uniform. I showed them my badge. But what that person actually proceeded to do was call the control room to confirm that I was an actual officer within that neighborhood team. I'll tell you how I felt at that time, Higgsy. I felt less than that person. I felt like, why is this happening to me? And it was it's choking me up, to be honest, even thinking about it. It was quite a strange time. And that's why I think that it's a generational thing where there might be there might not be some trust within the community. I don't know.
Yeah, I think having that said to you, to have someone kind of come back and not believe that, I think must have been absolutely just so upsetting and just really a knife to the heart, really.
Yeah, it was like a slap on the face, to be honest. It was it, it, I don't want to go through that again, and I don't want anyone else to go through
No,
it again. But
100%.
but then if you're thinking about it, it's like how can we promote that inclusion within the community? We're not talking about we're talking about the community, not even the workplace. So, and I think it comes back down to educating, raising awareness, which we're doing through here. One of the reasons we started the podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's hard when it's a generational thing as well because think how many years, what 60 plus years that's been ingrained in them. It's very it's very hard to kind of put these new ways of thinking to them because they're just so stuck in their ways. Um, so just going back to when you were in the police as well, did you ever experience any other racism within the workplace? Just moving away from the public, was there anything in the workplace that you can remember?
There was a particular event that stands out for me, and this was when I was an actual police officer. So I was part of this neighborhood investigations team. And for this, I'm going to let the listeners make their own judgments about this because at that time for me it was quite odd. But hear me out. So just to give you a little bit of background, this sergeant was a fairly new line manager, and this wasn't the first or sole incident that happened with this skipper, but I would say it was the most significant. So in the past, just to give you an example, one night shift, the same sergeant was in charge of the night, and they've reallocated me to man up the covert car, which is quite exciting because you're not wearing uniform and you're blending in with the public. So I asked the skipper when I was told that I'm going to man up the covert car. Oh, who is my driver for the night? It's really a standard question you ask. And they responded by saying, "Oh, you don't want to be in the covert car? Okay, you can man up the front office of the police station for the night." And that's exactly what I ended up doing. So that's just a little bit of background in terms of what had happened. So coming back to that particular incident with that same sergeant, I asked the sergeant if I could get some assistance from my fellow colleague regarding an investigation to carry out some inquiries because at that time I couldn't go out. And this was in the writing room, which is quite an open space. I was one of the only Asian officers there, and there were officers from the previous emergency response team who were waiting to clock off, and some officers from my emergency response team scattered around the writing room. So I went up to the sergeant and asked for help. They refused, which is fine. But then they said words to the effect of, "Get back in your box," in a very condescending and spiteful way. That skipper said that quite loud enough that everyone in the vicinity could hear it. And I just don't think it was appropriate at that time. Like I mentioned, I want the listeners to make up your own mind about this. But when that skipper said that to me, I felt like they were talking to me like I'm some kind of animal to get back in my box. At the end of the day, I'm only a human being, just like you, just like everyone else. And that moment was probably one of the moments where I was the most angriest. And it takes a lot for me to reach that point. After that happened, I went back and sat on my desk, and one of my colleagues who was sitting behind me when this whole thing took place, and for anonymity, we're going to refer them as PC Ben or Ben. They reached out to me and they said that they heard what was said to me, and that if I wanted to take things further, that they'll back me. So if I wanted to make an official complaint, they will support me. And do you know how that made me feel at that moment? It made me feel human again. That someone is willing to go out their way to stand up for me. I'll tell you what happened after that. The skipper actually called me to their office.
What did he say when you went? Did you go to the office or?
I did go. I did go to the office, but it was very brief. In my head, I just didn't see a future in the police if it was going to carry on like this. And what I did after I left the skipper's office, I immediately called. The first person that I called was my friend who started at the same time as me in the police academy, and he advised me to call the federation to ask for some guidance from them. And you know what? What that sergeant did was probably not the worst thing that happened. When I called the federation, who are meant to be impartial, I explained to them the circumstances, so exactly what happened with that skipper. And the person on the other side of the phone said that they knew that skipper, and words to the effect of that they are a good person. So I thanked them. I ended the call, and that was the nail in the coffin for me. I think, I really thought I was going to do 30 years in the police and retire, but sometimes the grass is not greener on the other side.
Mate, I'm so sorry that you've had to go through all of this. It's just not okay. And I think that call with the Federation just completely devalidates that whole experience that you had just by saying, "Oh, but he's a good person," because it's a lot more than that. He clearly is not a good person as well. But how did this whole experience make you feel as well?
Taking into account this experience and all the other experiences that I've had so far in my life, it does prevent you from becoming the best person that you can be. And deep down in me, I do have a sense of imposter syndrome, an element of not feeling good enough or equal, and the fact that I have to work harder than everyone else. And if you look at the bigger picture, I don't think people realize how powerful words are and how powerful they can be. Words have an energy attached to them. So think about the impact that this is going to have on an individual because your words are often remembered. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank PC Ben. You know who you are. And if you're listening to this, thank you for being a great ally and for standing up for me back then. And I know these are my own personal experiences, but other minority ethnic officers will be able to relate to this. And I hope that this will open up conversations. One thing I'd like to clarify is that in the police, you have some really amazing colleagues, friends, and officers. However, there are some bad apples.
Yeah, I think your your mate Ben, I think it's a perfect example of being a good ally. So in a sense of when you have that privilege to speak up, you have to, like, you can't just sit there and let those things happen because you've got this privilege. You need to be the one to step forward and say, actually, no, this isn't okay.
Completely agree with you. I think we need more Bens in the world. It's like whether that's in your personal life or in the workplace, people who challenge and they're not afraid to challenge or speak out.
100%. And even if they're not your family or someone close to you, it's probably even more important to do it for to stand up for someone that you may not even know, because you can see that in, like, there's injustice, there's discrimination going on. You need to be that voice to say, actually, shut up, basically. That's it.
Literally that. I would say, but I'm not going to.
Shut the hell up, man. Um, yeah, I just want to just say thank you so much for sharing all your experiences with us, because I know it must have been hard to kind of relive those experiences, but it's amazing, and it's going to raise so much awareness around how people can actually help and what to do in the future when they see something like this going on.
So Higgsy, what about you? Have you ever been discriminated against, or have you felt any discrimination?
So personally, being a white female, I haven't felt anything close to what you've experienced. So hearing all of these things you've been through and these situations, it really hits the heartstrings, because yeah, I couldn't begin to think what that would feel like.
And have you ever witnessed discrimination? So not you personally, but have you ever seen discrimination happen in front of you?
So I haven't seen racial discrimination, but I think if I did, I would definitely be how Ben was, and I would definitely stand up for what was going on, regardless if I knew the person or not.
I love that. I love that. And like I said, these are the type of people we need, like you, Ben. It's just as long as people back each other, that's the main thing.
100%. If you can't relate to what's going on, you've just got to try and put yourself in those shoes and think, what would I want someone to do in this situation? So yeah, it's so important.
Thank you, Higgsy. Thank you for being open.
If there's one key takeaway from this episode that you could give, what would that be?
I think we need more Bens in the world, great allies, people are going to stand up for what's right. But in terms of an organizational viewpoint, I mentioned that the skipper was a fairly new line manager. So as an organization, you should be able to provide the resources, tools, even courses, training, for example, in terms of unconscious bias, just to raise awareness and make them better aligned with their teams when they join their teams. I think that's probably a useful approach.
So this was a very deep conversation today. So if you feel impacted by any of these experiences that were shared today or any of the topics, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. But thank you so much for listening. And please make sure you subscribe to the podcast and also give it a rating and review if you enjoyed it. Our next episode will be dropping next month as well. So stay tuned.
Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on Diversity and Inclusion, Satisfying the Tick Box.